The final phase of jury selection in Sean Diddy Combs' federal criminal trial is getting underway. 12 jurors and 6 alternates. They are expected to be seated this morning, and then opening statements begin. We could see also the prosecution's key witness, Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, testify today. You remember that CNN last year published a hotel surveillance video from 2016 showing Combs attacking Ventura. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. If convicted, Sean Combs could spend the rest of his life in prison. CNN's Lee Waldman is outside the courthouse, and this really is all going to really get underway today. But what is expected or could happen today?
Kate, good to be with you this morning. So we're still waiting for that final phase of the jury selection to get underway. It was supposed to start a little more than 10 minutes ago, but as we saw last week, more delays in the morning. We saw at the end of last week, 2 of those potential jurors were dismissed for cause by the judge. Then he put a delay on the whole thing, saying we're going to move those final stages of the jury selection process to this morning. That's what we're hoping to see happen any time now. And less than 30 minutes ago, Kate, it was a flurry of activity behind us at this courthouse as we saw people make their way inside of the courtroom. One of Diddy's accusers actually in the front of that line waiting to get inside. We also saw Sean Diddy Combs' mother and his children arrive and enter inside of that courtroom. We saw boxes of what appeared to be evidence being wheeled inside as well. But we're hoping to get the jury selected, sat, sworn in, and then to have those opening statements get underway. Another expectation that we have today, we're hoping to hear from some of the government's witnesses. They said they're hoping to present 3 witnesses this week, and that includes Cassie Ventura, like you mentioned, longtime former girlfriend of Sean Diddy Combs. She's seen as one of the central witnesses to the prosecution's case. In addition to Ventura, we're also expecting to hear from an escort who is seen as a witness in this case as well. We heard last week from the defense they're planning on attacking Ventura as well, saying that she was mutual in the domestic violence in this case, saying that she was violent toward Combs. Combs nodded his head yes whenever that was presented by his legal team in the courtroom yesterday. So we're waiting for Combs to arrive. We're waiting for this final stage of this jury selection process to get underway so we can start to hear some of those opening statements and hear from some of those witnesses expected to be called, Kate.
Absolutely. All right, let's see what happens so far yet this morning. It's good to see you, Lee. Thank you very much.
All right, very shortly we could see opening statements in the federal trial of Sean Combs. Just after 12 jurors and 6 alternates are chosen and sworn in. Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. If convicted, he could face the rest of his life in prison. With us now, CNN senior legal analyst, former federal and state prosecutor Elie Honig. It's all really getting started this morning. Elie, walk us through the charges.
Yeah, John, we are in federal court downtown Manhattan, a couple miles from here, and that's important because our charges are federal charges. Now, the lead charge is what we call a racketeering conspiracy, meaning Sean Combs allegedly was part of a criminal organization that committed multiple interconnected crimes. What are those underlying crimes? According to the prosecutors, sex trafficking, kidnapping, drugs, guns, arson, and obstruction. Now, John, you may notice something unusual about this particular racketeering conspiracy, which is it's one guy. Now, there's allegedly other people involved, but Sean Combs is the only one who's ever been charged with this. Watch for the defense to play off of that. Beyond the racketeering, there also are sex trafficking charges. The first set involve force, fraud, or coercion. The second set do not, and there's a huge difference here because if Combs is convicted of the force, fraud, or coercion, he's looking at 15 to life. If he's only convicted of the non-forcible interstate prostitution, it's 0 to 10. So big difference there in the charges.
Huge difference in the severity of the possible sentences there. What are we talking about in terms of evidence and witnesses?
Yeah, so the witnesses are going to be key here. This will be a victim-driven case. The primary victim has been designated victim number 1. That is Cassandra Ventura, who is Sean Combs' long-term girlfriend. She will be a key witness. She's actually the only witness victim who has decided to use her own name. There will be maybe 3 other victims who, if they testify, will be using pseudonyms, fake names to protect their confidentiality. Important to note, though, the prosecution said on Friday they're having problems with victim 3 who does not want to testify. They have subpoenaed that victim. That's risky for prosecutors. Also, of course, There is the video, the surveillance video from 2016 in a hotel showing the vicious attack by Sean Combs on Cassandra Ventura. And of course, there's other evidence alluded to in the indictment. We expect to see some of these bottles of baby oil and lubricant from these so-called freak-offs. We expect to see firearms and ammunition that were seized during search warrants at Sean Combs' homes. There should be drugs also alluded to in the indictment and medical records of the victims showing that there was force used.
When you see these RICO cases and you see here like 8 weeks of testimony in this, you tend to say, oh, this must be a complicated case. What about the defense, Ellie?
So I think the first defense is going to be this was consensual. These were long-term relationships. And even if, John, even if these were abusive physical relationships, that would be a state-level domestic violence charge, but that would not necessarily be a federal racketeering conspiracy. Relatedly, I think you're going to see the defense go after the victims, the witnesses. They're going to say, first of all, these were consensual relationships. Second of all, though, I think the defense is going to try to cast doubt on the motivations. They're going to point out the fact that all of these victims have civil suits against Sean Combs. And so I think the defense is going to say this is a pile-on. They're all trying to get their names out there. They're all trying to make money. So that's what I expect to see from the defense.
Yeah, in many ways, as complicated as many facets of this case as there are, it does get down to the issue of consent, a very classic defense in cases like this. How do you expect this will play out?
So here's the process, and we're told it's going to take about 8 weeks. Sometimes I think, though, those estimates, I know from my own experience, end up overestimated, and then the trial ends up being shorter. Jury selection should conclude today. They'll narrow down to their 12 jurors and 6 alternates. Then today we will get into opening statements. Prosecution will open. By the way, the defense does not have to open at this point. I think they will in this case, but they have the option of choosing not to do that. The prosecution will put on its witnesses and evidence. The defense will put on a case if it chooses. Then we will see closings. The jury will then get the legal charge. They will deliberate. And at some point in June or July, they will return a verdict.
So right here in opening statements, you talk about the defense. They don't have to. Elizabeth Wagmeister, our great reporter who's been way out in front of this, just got some information. The defense, Sean Combs, excited that they can finally tell their side of the story.
There you go.
That's where you'll begin to hear it.
We'll hear that today, probably.
Ellie Honig, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean.
CNN anchor and chief legal analyst Laura Coates is outside the courthouse today. Laura, a lot to be expected on day one.
Day one is finally here for Sean Diddy Combs. He is, as you said, facing life in prison if convicted of all of these 5 felony counts, all of which are very serious. Racketeering, prostitution, you have sex trafficking, all this combines to have the equivalent of life if there's a conviction. There is a really important thing happening today. Of course, we don't have the final jurors. They were afraid, I think, of having people maybe over the weekend, Sarah, get a little bit of cold feet, and they're going to seat them finally today. So at this moment in time, the prosecution and the defense have no idea who these 12 jurors and 6 alternates will be to decide the fate of Sean Diddy Combs. They're also going to have some very important witnesses today, not the least of which is the prosecution's star witness, his girlfriend of many years, Cassie Ventura, who of course we saw victimized in that video that was obtained by CNN by Sean Diddy Combs allegedly. That will play into this not because there's an alternate or separate assault charge, but because this is a charge and an element they're trying to prove that somehow she was resisting or that this is part of the fraud or the force that was used to try to encourage and engage and force her to involve herself in these so-called freak-offs. And so we're going to have a lot of information coming at these jurors fast and furiously. We will see Sean Diddy Combs in court today to decide what the fate will be. But opening statements, Sarah, this is the moment you're going to hear from the prosecution to lay out their case. What will they allege? What do they want the jurors to know, to hang on to, and what will be an 8 to 10 week trial? We're also going to hear from the defense, who will give us their official preview of what their defense will be. He has pleaded absolutely not guilty, and we will see how it all turns out.
I'm just curious, can you set the scene for us? Because this case, I mean, everyone from New York to around the world knows who Sean Combs is, maybe has heard some of these allegations, but there are a lot of other very well-known famous people who could be called in this case.
In fact, during the voir dire, the fancy way of saying jury selection, they had forms in advance for the prospective jurors. They listed over 100 names of celebrities who might be mentioned in the orbit of this trial, either as people who could be called or people whose names might be actually referenced. And so right now we're talking about somebody like Diddy, who since the 90s had been a hip-hop mogul and executive, and of course following the death of Biggie Smalls, also became an artist and the face of Bad Boy Records. Everyone knows who he is. It's not a matter for these jurors to figure out who does not know him. It's a matter of who can set aside what they think they know and receive the evidence from the prosecution, who carries a very significant burden beyond a reasonable doubt. And so don't look for anyone to think, oh, I've never heard of this person or this case. No, it's about who can set that aside and follow the elements in the law as laid out by the jury instructions and this judge.
Yep, and I see the dozens of journalists who are gathering behind you before this starts in just a bit here. Laura Klotz, glad you're there. Thank you so much.